They lined them up beside the piano, 5 women in wrinkled dresses, their wrists still marked from the train ride, their faces too stunned to speak. The saloon reeked of sweat and whiskey, and the laughter of men drowned out every last trace of dignity. The barkeep banged a tin mug on the counter, shouting, "Fresh out of Kansas!" Gentle, obedient, and don't ask questions. The first girl trembled as she was pushed forward, a blonde barely 20, eyes darting toward the door that would never open for her again. Then came a tall widow with a scar on her cheek, a Mexican girl gripping a Bible to her chest, and a mother with haunted eyes holding her child close. The 5th didn't move. Her name was Josie. She stood with her jaw tight, eyes hard, and fists clenched behind her skirt. Unlike the others, Josie hadn't come to marry. She had come to disappear. But the moment they herded her like cattle in front of those leering faces, something inside her snapped. The bidding began. Coins clinked, boots shuffled. A man shouted, "$5 for the pale one!" Someone else raised it. "10 for the widow! I like 'em quiet!" Then it was Josie's turn. "This one got fire," a rancher laughed. "Bet she bites." The room chuckled, but Josie didn't flinch. "I ain't for sale," she said, not loudly, but clearly. The barkeep growled. "You are tonight." She stepped forward. Her voice didn't shake. "Then someone best draw their gun, 'cause I ain't walking out of here owned." A hush fell. No one moved. Josie's heart pounded in her ears, but she didn't blink. Her father had sold her name. The rail line had taken her home. But she would be damned before she let a whiskey-soaked gambler buy what was left of her soul. The barkeep reached under the bar. Josie braced herself. But before the man could draw, a voice rang out from the far end of the room. "I'll take all 5. Heads turned. A figure leaned against the doorframe, dust clinging to his coat, a Colt holstered at his hip. His hat shadowed his face, but his voice carried steel. "And I'll take 'em free," the barkeep sneered. "Who the hell are you?" The stranger stepped forward. "Someone who remembers his mother's eyes the day they sold her too." Josie stared. The saloon, the chains, the crowd, it all faded. She didn't know who he was, but something told her this wasn't where the story ended. It was where it began. The silence cracked like thunder after his words. The barkeep's lips curled into a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Ain't no charity in this town, mister. You want 'em free? You better bleed for it." The stranger didn't blink. He unfastened his coat with deliberate calm, revealing a worn deputy's badge tucked into his belt. Faded, but real. "These women aren't yours to sell," he said. "They weren't yours to begin with." Josie's breath caught. The saloon's mood shifted, tension clawing through the whiskey fog. One of the bidders cursed under his breath. Another stepped back, hand off his coin pouch. But the barkeep wasn't moved by badges. "This is my place," he hissed. "Out here, paper don't mean much." The stranger stepped forward, eyes locked. "Then let's talk in the alley. But when I walk back in, they walk out behind me." Behind the bar, a shotgun clicked. Chairs scraped. Josie glanced at the other women, each one paralyzed by the same hopeless terror she'd felt since boarding the train west. Except now, there was something else. A chance. The barkeep leaned toward the stranger, voice low and dangerous. "Why risk your neck for them?" The stranger didn't smile. "Because my mother begged someone once, and no one answered." The tension broke with emotion too fast to follow. The barkeep lunged, but the stranger was faster. His boot struck the counter edge, sending the shotgun flying. A punch followed, a crack of bone and blood. Chaos erupted. Men scrambled, tables overturned. Josie grabbed the widow's arm, pulling her back. The mother clutched her child. The Mexican girl dropped her Bible, and picked up a stool like a club. The blonde girl stood frozen, until Josie turned and shouted, "Move!" The stranger fought like a man who'd bled before and didn't mind doing it again. He didn't kill. He didn't have to. He only needed to be louder than their fear. When the dust cleared, the barkeep lay unconscious, blood running from his nose. The bitters were gone, scattered like cowards. The stranger exhaled, then turned to the women. "If you follow me, I'll get you safe, but I won't ask twice." Josie looked at the other brides. One by one, they nodded. She stepped forward, last of all. "Who are you?" she asked. He looked at her, really looked, and said only, "Call me Wade." Then he opened the door, letting in the morning light, and walked into the street. Josie followed, barefoot but unbroken, her sisters behind her. They weren't saved. Not yet. But they were no longer sold. They left the saloon like fugitives, skirts brushing dust, eyes wide with disbelief. No one spoke at first. Wade led without ceremony, his boots sinking into the dry earth, one hand resting loosely near his holster. The 5 brides followed like shadows, silent, stunned, uncertain what freedom meant now that it had no price tag. Josie kept close to the front, her eyes darting between Wade's broad back and the horizon beyond the town. "Where are we going?" the blonde finally whispered. Wade didn't turn. "Far enough they can't find you. Close enough you can still decide what comes next." The mother's child whimpered, and Josie instinctively moved to help. She lifted the boy into her arms, surprised by how light he felt, like someone who hadn't been fed properly in weeks. "You got a plan?" Josie asked Wade, her voice calm but pointed. He looked back then, and for the first time, his eyes met hers fully. "Only part of one. But it starts with getting you out of sight." He led them toward the edge of the low hills, where a thicket of cottonwoods hid an old trail. "There's a shack near Devil's Ridge, abandoned for years. Used to belong to a friend." "Used to?" the widow asked. Wade's jaw tensed. "Before he didn't come home from the war." No one replied. The road bent sharply, and the town disappeared behind them. For the first time, the women breathed. It wasn't relief. It was something rougher, like the edge of belief. Josie kept scanning the rear trail. "They'll come after us," she muttered. "They saw your badge." Wade nodded. "Then let's give 'em more than fear to chase." As they reached a narrow pass, he paused and turned. "Names. I need 'em." The widow cleared her throat. "Helen." The Mexican girl held her Bible tighter. "Sophia." The blonde, almost too soft to hear, said, "Millie." The mother, with a protective arm around her boy, whispered, "Beatrice. And this is Sam." Wade's eyes finally landed on Josie. "And you?" She didn't hesitate. "Josie, and I'm not scared of dying, just of never having lived." Wade gave the faintest nod. "Then let's make sure you do." They pressed on, the dry wind shifting as clouds rolled above. No one noticed the rider on the hill behind them. A scarred man in a bowler hat, chewing a toothpick and watching through field glasses. He tapped his heel on the horse's side and turned away. Back toward town. Back toward the men who wanted their property returned. And this time, they'd come loaded. The shack wasn't much. 4 leaning walls, a slanted roof patched with hides, and a stove that coughed more soot than heat. But it was standing, and that made it better than the saloon. Wade pushed open the creaking door and scanned the room with eyes that missed nothing. "It'll hold," he said. "For now." The women filed in cautiously, glancing at the single cot, the busted table, the rope dangling from a nail in the corner. Josie set down Sam on a folded blanket, then helped Beatrice sit beside him. Sophia dropped to her knees and began clearing the ash from the stove, her fingers moving with practiced grace. Millie stared at the wall, arms folded tightly as if afraid someone might touch her. Wade threw down his saddlebag. "There's a spring 2 minutes south. I'll fill the canteens." Josie followed him out. "You're not staying long, are you?" Wade didn't answer right away. He bent at the spring, dipping the tin cups and letting the cool water run over his fingers. "I've got to ride to Burnt Hollow. Talk to someone who knows these bastards." "You mean the ones who were buying us?" He looked up sharply. "I mean the ones who brought you here in the first place." Josie stiffened. "There's more?" Wade nodded. "This wasn't just a backroom auction. There's a circuit. Mail-order brides go missing from ledgers. No follow-up. No family left to ask questions. Someone's making sure they disappear clean." Josie's hands clenched. "And what about us?" Wade stood, handed her the water, and said, "You're not going missing." Back at the shack, the women were settling into the strange rhythm of half-safety. Helen was sharpening a kitchen knife she'd found beneath the cot. Sophia had managed to light the stove. Beatrice hummed a lullaby for Sam. But it was Millie who spoke first when Josie returned. "He won't come back," she said softly. "Men like that don't." Josie set the water down hard enough to make the tin rattle. "Then maybe we hold without him." She looked at each of them. "They think we're broken, but we got this far. We can get further." The women said nothing, but the silence wasn't hollow. It was waiting. Later that night, after Wade had ridden out, Josie sat on the stoop and stared into the dark. She didn't cry. Not anymore. But when a wolf howled far off and a twig snapped too close, she reached for the old axe by the door. If they were coming, she'd be ready. This time they weren't stealing anyone. They came at dawn, not in a stampede, but like rot, silent, creeping, certain. First came the sound of hooves, then the shimmer of metal through the trees. Josie spotted them from the back window, her breath catching in her throat. "Riders!" she hissed. Helen grabbed the knife. Sophia pulled Millie toward the stove and pushed Beatrice and Sam into the pantry. "How many?" Helen asked. "4, maybe 5. One's chewing a toothpick," Josie muttered. "Same man from the saloon." Her heart pounded. She remembered his eyes, lazy and cruel, like a fox full on blood. They didn't knock, didn't shout. The door swung open on its own, as if even the house was too afraid to stand firm. The toothpick man stepped in, boots leaving small clouds in the dust. His hand rested easy on his belt. "Well now," he said, gaze sweeping over them. "Ain't this cozy? You girls had yourselves a vacation." No one replied. Josie stood in front of them all, jaw locked, axe handle behind her leg. "He ain't here," the man said, pretending to glance around. "The White Knight. Should have known. Men like that ride in for show, then ride out before supper." "You're trespassing," Josie said. He laughed. "Trespassing? You think this shack's yours?" He took a step forward. "You ain't got a deed. You ain't got a man. You're just squatters with skirts." The others stayed silent, breaths shallow. Millie whimpered. Sophia placed herself in front of her. Josie straightened. "We're free. That's all the claim we need." His grin vanished. "That so?" He turned slightly and motioned to the others outside. One of the men whistled. "We'll take 2. Leave the mouthy one for later." Josie's grip tightened. "You'll take no one." He took another step, hand near his holster. Josie raised the axe and said evenly, "You better draw fast." But before he could move, a crack split the air like thunder. The toothpick man jerked sideways, blood blooming across his shoulder. Screams erupted. Gunfire exploded outside. Josie ducked. Sophia pulled Millie to the floor. Helen dove over Sam. Wade burst through the back door, rifle raised, smoke still curling from the muzzle. "Didn't think I was coming back?" he growled. He moved like a storm, firing, reloading, firing again. The riders outside scattered, 2 falling before they reached their saddles. The third bolted into the trees. Wade didn't chase. He stood in the doorway, breath ragged, eyes on Josie. "I said you wouldn't disappear," he whispered. Josie stared at the man, bleeding on the floor, then back at Wade. "Neither will you," she replied. Wade's hands were slick with the toothpick man's blood as he tied a shirt around the wound. "He's alive," he muttered, more to himself than to the others. "Barely." Josie knelt beside him, watching the man's chest rise and fall like it was choosing whether to keep going. "Why'd you keep him breathing?" she asked. Wade didn't look up. "Because dead men don't talk, and I want names." Helen stood by the window, knife still red in her grip. "We can't stay here." Beatrice clutched Sam tight. "They'll send more. Men like this, they don't stop." Wade stood and wiped his hands on his pants. "Number they don't. That's why we stop them first." Josie followed him outside where the bodies of the 2 fallen riders already lay stiff in the morning sun. Buzzards circled above. The third had vanished into the hills, and Josie knew it was only a matter of time before word spread. Wade leaned on the fence post, his jaw set hard. "There's a marshal in Cross Timber. Name's Halvin. Used to ride with me. We take this man to him, tell the story straight, make it loud." Josie frowned. "And what happens to us?" "That depends," Wade said, turning to her. "Do you want to run again? Hide? Or do you want this to end where it started, with truth?" Josie didn't answer, but her silence held weight. Inside, Sophia had cleaned the floor where blood had smeared. Millie sat beside the stove, eyes glassy, murmuring a prayer in German. Helen checked the stranger's pulse again and muttered, "Still alive. For now." Wade and Josie returned, dragging a broken wheelbarrow to carry the prisoner. They wrapped his wounds tight and bound his hands behind his back. Josie stood over him one last time and whispered, "You picked the wrong girls." They left the shack in silence, each step forward a declaration. Josie walked beside Wade. She wasn't afraid now, not of the road, not of what lay at the end. "Why'd you come back?" she asked quietly. Wade didn't pause. "Because I knew what it felt like to be left." That evening they camped under the stars, fire flickering low, the toothpick man groaning in his binds. Beatrice told Sam a story about horses with wings. Sophia sang a lullaby in Spanish. Helen kept watch with her knife across her lap. Josie sat close to Wade, their shoulders nearly touching. "What if the marshal won't help?" she asked. "Then we make noise till someone does." Josie nodded slowly. "I'm done being quiet." Wade met her gaze, and something unspoken passed between them. Whatever this was, it wasn't just survival anymore. It was justice. Cross Timber sat low against the plains, a scattering of wood and smoke and suspicion. As Wade rode in, the townsfolk paused to watch. A battered wheelbarrow behind his horse, a stranger bound and bleeding inside, and 5 women walking close like ghosts turned flesh. Marshal Halvin stood on the porch of his office, coat off, sleeves rolled, cleaning his rifle. He looked up, squinted, and muttered, "Wade Bishop as I live and breathe." Wade dismounted, jaw tight. "Heard you still wore a badge?" Halvin chuckled, then eyed the prisoner. "Who's your friend?" Josie stepped forward. "The man who tried to sell us. Tried again to take us back." Halvin's expression shifted. "That so?" Wade handed over a folded page. "He's not the only one. You've seen the ads, the missing girls. There's a network, Hal. Men with papers and no conscience. Halvin took the page, read the scrawled names, then nodded once. Bring him in, carefully. They did. The prisoner groaned as Halvin locked him in a cell, then turned to the women. You five got a place to stay? Josie answered first. Number, but we didn't come for shelter. We came to be heard. Halvin stared at her a long moment. You'll be heard, but not all ears will listen kind. They never have, Helen muttered from the back. That night, Wade and Josie sat on the courthouse steps, watching the lamplights flicker in windows. The town whispered around them, some curious, some wary. You trust him? Josie asked. Wade nodded. Enough. Hal's the kind who'd rather bleed than look away. So are you, she said softly. Wade looked down at his hands, stained with dried blood and road dust. Not always. Josie leaned closer. You are now. Across the street, Millie stood inside the general store, holding a comb she'd never had the right to want. Sophia bartered for thread. Beatrice rocked Sam to sleep on the church bench. And Helen sharpened her knife anyway, just in case. When morning came, Halvin posted a notice outside the office. Trial to be held. Witnesses protected. Claims will be heard. It wasn't much, a few nailed words on splintered wood. But to 5 women once stripped of their names, it was thunder. A reckoning. Josie touched the edge of the paper and smiled faintly. Feels strange, she whispered. To be believed. Wade placed a hand on the post beside hers. Feels overdue? Behind them, boots approached. Voices rose. And for the first time, it wasn't to laugh or leer. It was to listen. They filled the benches, 1 row at a time. Wives with baby bundles, ranchers with sun-cracked hats, shopkeepers clutching folded arms. Not all came to support. Some came to stare. A few came to doubt. But they came. The trial was held in the schoolhouse. Desks pushed aside, chalkboard wiped clean. Marshal Halvin stood tall, badge gleaming beneath the oil lamps. Let the truth be spoken, he said, and silence followed. The prisoner sat with a swollen jaw and bandaged arm, shackled to the floor. He didn't speak, didn't need to. The women did. One by one they took the stand. Beatrice, voice shaking but eyes fierce, told of how the ad promised work, not servitude. Sophia spoke next, her words translated through a boy from the church, her story painting images of a journey she had not chosen, of prayers whispered to walls that never answered. Millie barely whispered, but when she did, it was enough. I didn't say no, because I didn't know I was allowed to. Helen followed with fire in her words, naming the men who had laughed when the train left the station. They said we were pretty enough to profit, ugly enough to forget. Then Josie stood, not behind the rail, but in front of it. She looked not at the judge or the prisoner, but at the faces watching. There's a reason they pick women like us, she said. No families, no letters, no land to leave behind. They think no one will care. She took a slow breath. But we cared, for each other, and that made us dangerous. Some in the crowd shifted. Others nodded. One woman in the back wept openly. When Josie finished, Wade stepped forward. I'm not here to defend. I'm here to confirm. I saw what they did. I heard what they said. And I drew my weapon because no badge should protect filth. Halvin cleared his throat and stood. There'll be more trials, more names, but this is the start. Then he turned to the crowd. Anyone who knew what was happening and stayed quiet, your time's coming. A hush fell, heavy and full. Outside, dusk settled across the porch. Josie sat with the others, their hands loosely touching. A line of survival drawn in skin and silence. Wade stepped out last, resting his rifle beside the door. "You shook the ground today," he told Josie. She smiled faintly. "Then let's see what grows from it." Word spread faster than dust on the wind. By morning, a second woman came forward, a cook from a nearby ranch who'd been paid in silence after her sister vanished. Then a shop girl. Then a mother who admitted her daughter's letters had stopped 2 winters ago. Josie watched them come, faces drawn with shame and tremors, but walking anyway. The truth had cracked the dam, and now it rushed forward in names, places, tears. The marshal's desk overflowed with statements. Halvin looked like a man chasing a storm with bare hands, but he didn't stop. "We'll charge every last one," he said through grit teeth, "even if it takes the rest of my life." Wade never left Josie's side. He posted notices. He escorted the women who feared reprisals. He patched a leaking roof at the old shack, now turned into something closer to a home. Josie had taken to walking with Sam at dawn, telling him stories about knights and wolves, about women who refused to vanish. And every day more came, bruised, weathered, silent at first. But they came. A judge arrived from Dust Creek, a reporter from Denver. The story had turned into something larger than one saloon or one villain. It was wildfire now, and no one could smother it. But fire brings danger, too. One night, as Wade sat cleaning his rifle on the porch, a rock shattered the window behind him. Josie ducked, grabbed Sam, and yelled for the others to stay down. Outside, a figure rode off fast, dust clouds swallowing his trail. Halvin arrived within minutes, but the message was already carved into the porch rail. "Shut up or burn." Josie stood with the lantern, hands trembling, eyes fierce. "They want us afraid," she said. "They're scared we've stood this long." "Because you're winning," Halvin muttered. Wade placed a hand on her shoulder. "They'll try again." "Let 'em," Josie said. "Let them see what it looks like when the hunted don't run." The next day, Josie and the others returned to the schoolhouse and kept speaking. They held hands when fear crept close. They sang while sweeping floors, braided each other's hair with pins and flowers. And on Sunday they rang the old church bell, not for warning, not for grief, but for witness. Wade stood with them, eyes scanning every rooftop, rifle slung across his back. As the bell echoed across cross timber, Josie whispered, "That sound? That's what defiance feels like." And Wade smiled. It's also what change sounds like. The courthouse was packed by noon. Not with gawkers, but with those who had once turned their eyes away and now couldn't bear to look anywhere else. Josie stood tall beside Wade, her dress still patched, her boots worn thin, but her voice unshakable. Across the aisle, the accused sat in silence, 7 men in coats too fine for their conscience. The toothpick man, pale and bound, was wheeled in last, his eyes hollow from weeks of silence and consequence. Marshal Halvin read each name aloud, each charge, each testimony. Unlawful detainment, trafficking of persons, assault, coercion. The words dropped like hammers. But Josie watched the jury, watched the way one woman gripped her husband's hand tighter, the way a boy in the back cried when his mother's name was spoken as one who vanished years ago. When it was time for closing remarks, Wade stood. "Justice ain't just punishment," he said. "It's memory. These women were meant to be forgotten, sold like grain, but they chose to stand, to name names, to say, 'We exist.' That matters." Josie rose next. She didn't walk to the stand. She turned to face the crowd. "You watched us walk in here. 5 women no one would have stopped for a month ago, and now you listen. That means something. But this story isn't just ours anymore. It's yours too. So choose how it ends. Choose who you'll be remembered as." When she sat, silence fell so heavy it felt like reverence. The jury left. The town held its breath. And when the verdicts came, guilty, 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 they weren't just words. They were a door opening, a weight lifted, a scar acknowledged. Josie exhaled. Not relief, something bigger, something final. Outside, the sky had opened up with sun. Flowers bloomed in cracks that hadn't seen green in years. People clapped softly. Not celebration. Respect. The 5 women stood together on the courthouse steps. Helen held her knife less tightly now. Beatrice let Sam chase a butterfly across the grass. Millie laughed, actually laughed, at something Sophia whispered in Spanish. Josie turned to Wade. What now? He smiled. Now you write your own name, wherever you want it. She looked at the town, no longer a place of shame, but a place she had changed. Then she reached into her coat, pulled out a folded paper, and nailed it beside the old trial notice. It read, Josie's boarding house. Room for the broken, the brave, and the becoming. Please like, share, and subscribe to support more true-hearted stories on Stories Left Behind. If you had seen her at that auction, would you have spoken up too? Let us know in the comments.